Alright, so in my blind I'm building 4 flaps. Basically what I've done is I've taken the entire length of this pole here and I have divided it into 4 sections. So from there, that gives me these lines. Now I know that between my flaps I want a 4-inch viewing gap, okay? So that gives me enough of a gap that I can kind of see through, but it isn't going to be terribly difficult to cover. It isn't going to be a big black hole that the birds can see. So if I've got a 4-inch gap here, this is my quarter mark. I am putting my hinges 3 inches from there on both sides. That way I get a little bit of room for these to go, okay? So my measurement here is the same as here. I've got 4-inch gap between where my quarter mark is, 4-inch gap here, 3 inches from that I've put this hinge in. Now the important thing about the hinges is that they have to be as close as possible so that when you put your blind flaps on, they're not crooked, they're not bending incorrectly. You want them to be as smooth as possible. And hinges can be kind of tricky. Taking my tape measure, I know that I have my 4-inch gap right here, okay? So from this side of it, because I already have this one, this will be door number 4, I go 3 inches from that gap right there. And that's going to be the start of where I put my hinge. And because of the way that this metal is set up, I may have to adjust that a little bit or just crimp it down real tight so that I get the angle that I want. Alright, so this is my spot right here. The first thing that I do is to make sure that these are as even as possible, as I kind of line this up. Right, and I've done this all the way throughout. Line up where I want this kind of to be, and then I mark it on the hinge itself where it should line up with the edge of the aluminum piping tubing. So now I've taken that and I place it at my 3-inch mark and I mark it like that. Okay, so this is where it gets really important. If I want to make sure that this lines up properly, I mark my aluminum, and then if I can, I take my drill from right there, give this a nice firm press, make sure I'm still in the right spot, I'm a little off there. Take my drill, and I drill through the hole in my thing there, okay? So that gives me my starting hole. The key is that you do this 1 hole at a time and you attach it 1 hole at a time, because if you don't, what's going to end up happening is these are going to get crooked like this or like this, and you want to make sure you do it 1 at a time. So I'm going to put my bolt in here. Probably what I'm going to do first is I'm going to grind this down, but I'm going to put my bolt in here and then I'm going to attach it as firmly as I can, but still give me a little bit so that I can move it, and then I will drill that hole through the hinge itself. That way you get as even as a mark as you can, okay? Alright, so I've now ground this edge flat so that I can attach this properly. I'm going to slide this in here. And I'm going to kind of put that on. I'm going to line it up as best I can. Grab my ratchet here. Punch it on there. Alright. Nice and tight. That gives you a nice firm mount, and you can see my lines are still lined up. And I'm there. So, because I haven't marked that, but this is now attached, just take my other drill. I'm going to punch through that hole. Done. Alright. Take my other bolt. Bust off the burrs on the bottom here. Bolt comes up through the hole. Nut attaches. ratchet it down. All right, just like that, plain and simple. Hinges on, okay? 3-inch gap, 4-inch gap. These are my 1/4-inch marks here. So all I have now is to put one more over here, and I will be finished with putting on my hinges, and next comes building the doors. Okay guys, so I finally finished the first door, or the first flap to the blind. And I've still got to install a stop there, so it stops. But I've basically got this front half piece done. So I'm installing 4 doors. One of the things that I did is, once I built this, I made it as close to a 6-inch gap here as possible, and I actually ended up flipping my hinges around. When I first started doing this, I had put them like that over there, and figured out that it's actually a lot more effective if I bring them the hinge side to the inside, and then that rests on itself there. I also broke my own rule just because of range of motion, and I put the nuts on this side on the inside and ended up switching the bolts there, so that way it swings open more. And that, if I can jump in here and show you, gives you quite a bit of swing. So you can see from where I'm standing about where my head is. So if we're sitting on our stool and this is resting here, this will swing open to there. And that should give me plenty of room to swing and shoot out of the boat. So I ended up making these doors, and basically what I did is I split the blind, the whole length of the front, into 4ths. I measured it and divided it into 4ths, and that way when I swing these closed, you can see here kind of what this is going to look like. All right, so this is my stool, and what we're going to do is we're going to buy a bunch of these stools. You can buy them at Walmart. They're like $5 or $6 or something really cheap. You can see here kind of where our height is at, and I think this is a pretty appropriate height. What that does is, this is going to be a gap here. This is going to be mesh covered, or like chicken wire covered with cover on it, and this piece here is as well. This is going to be solid. This gives me a nice little gap that I can view out, look at my ducks. Let me slide over so I'm actually in front of one of my 4 doors. So it gives me a nice gap here so I can watch my ducks flying, right? Kind of see through this piece here. And then when it's time to shoot, I can push my gate open and stand up. And that works all the way down the blind here. So the only issue I ran into is this gap here is a little bit more narrow, but that's because my boat naturally narrows, as most do. I might correct that here in a little bit, because I've got to put some stabilization here, and if I lift that up and push it forward, it'll fix a little bit of that gap, but not a huge deal. All right, so the other part of this that I did is to get these to rest. I just took a piece of conduit. I had a bunch of this conduit. It's the same stuff that I was using to like connect my posts and stuff here. And I just slid it down inside, and I bolted it in, and I gave it a little bit of a bend. And I did that on all these as well. That way they close well, and as it gets padded up, it'll have a little bit of room extra to close too.